Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. This time, we're taking a look at something pretty fascinating. It's called the principle of reciprocation. Have you ever felt this, almost irresistible urge to give back when someone gives to you? Well, that's what we're diving deep into today.
It's really powerful, this principle.
It is?
It's like this hidden code
Oh, yeah.
that governs so much of how we interact with each other.
Right. Okay,
without us even realizing it.
Before we get too far, I think it's important to define it.
Absolutely.
What exactly is the principle of reciprocation?
Yeah, so at its core, the principle of reciprocation is this deep-seated sense of obligation to repay others for what they've given us. It's like an invisible social contract.
Like an I owe you one sort of thing.
Exactly. But it goes even further than that. It's not just about tangible things. It can be favors, kindness, even concessions in a negotiation. And what's so interesting is that it's so powerful, this principle, that it can even work for uninvited favors.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. So it's like when...
leaving us feeling indebted even if we didn't ask for anything.
Yeah, like when someone holds the door open for you and you're like, oh, I got to do something nice for this person now, even though you could have opened the door yourself.
Precisely.
Okay.
That's reciprocation in action. And it's not just some social etiquette thing. This principle has deep evolutionary and social roots.
That makes sense, I guess. You think about our ancestors, they needed cooperation, right?
Exactly.
Exchanging favors was essential for survival.
Exactly. So reciprocation sort of ensured that those who helped others would be helped in return.
Right. So it strengthens the bonds within the group.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this instinct, it makes sense.
Yeah.
How is this primal instinct playing out in today's world?
In more ways than you might think. We see it everywhere, from marketing and sales to personal relationships, even international diplomacy. It's fascinating.
I bet. So it's not just about returning that cup of sugar that you borrowed from your neighbor anymore.
Not at all. So let's take a look at this guy, Joe Girard.
Okay.
Famously known as the greatest car salesman. Cialdini talks about him in his book Influence. Girard would send all his customers holiday cards with this simple message. I like you.
I like you. That's it.
That's it. Simple, but genius.
Okay.
This small, consistent gesture fostered a sense of reciprocity in his customers.
Wow.
They felt liked, so they liked him back.
Right.
And ultimately, they were more likely to do business with him.
So it wasn't about some sort of flashy sales tactic or high pressure. It was about building genuine rapport.
Exactly. Yeah. Through liking. Through this principle of liking, yeah.
Interesting.
It reminds us that people are much more likely to say yes when they feel valued and appreciated. And it worked. He sold thousands of cars, this guy.
Wow, that's incredible. Okay, so clearly this principle can be used for good.
Yeah.
But are there instances where it's used less ethically?
Unfortunately, yes. It can be a really powerful tool for persuasion.
Right.
And not always for the best reasons. Cialdini actually talks about how he himself fell victim to this.
Really?
He did.
Tell me more.
So he shares this story about how he ended up buying a very expensive entertainment package that he didn't even want. And all because of this sales tactic called rejection, then retreat.
Rejection, then retreat.
Okay, what is that?
So imagine a salesperson approaches you with this ridiculously expensive offer, something you'd never in a million years buy, right?
Right.
Something you'd immediately reject. But then they back down, seemingly making a concession, and they offer you a smaller, more reasonable package, which is the one they wanted to sell you all along.
Oh, so they're making it seem like they're doing you a favor by lowering the price, even though that was the goal all along.
Exactly.
Okay.
And because they've made this concession, you feel obligated to reciprocate.
Oh, I see.
By accepting this better deal.
That's so sneaky.
It is sneaky.
I can see how that would work, though.
Oh, it works.
I bet most people don't even realize what's happening. That's right. Because it plays on our desire to be fair and reasonable.
Right.
And it can be very effective.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so rejection, then retreat. We got to watch out for that.
Definitely.
Are there any other techniques that sort of exploit this principle? Because I have a feeling that's just the tip of the iceberg.
You are absolutely right. There are many ways this principle can be leveraged, and they're not always so obvious. Let's dive into another example. Have you ever walked through Costco and been bombarded by those free samples?
Free samples, yes. I love them.
I know, everyone does.
And I always end up buying more than I intended. It's like they're so good at getting you.
They are good.
With those little bites.
That's the principle of reciprocation subtly at play. Even something small, you know, a tiny piece of cheese or a sip of juice triggers this sense of obligation.
Yeah. Makes you want to buy it.
It does. And there's this other really interesting technique, the door in the face technique.
Door in the face, what's that?
So I remember that study by Friedman and Fraser you mentioned in the outline?
Yeah, I think so.
They asked people to put a large, really unattractive sign in their yards advocating safe driving.
Yeah, like a big old billboard.
Exactly. Most people, of course, said no.
Makes sense. Who wants that?
Right. But here's the thing. Weeks earlier, these same people had been approached with a much smaller request just to display a tiny 3-inch sign with the same message.
Oh, interesting.
And you know what? This seemingly insignificant initial request drastically increased compliance with that larger request later.
Oh, wow. So even small, seemingly unrelated commitments can have a lasting impact.
They can. It's like we're primed to say yes once we've already said yes, once, even if it was weeks ago.
That's wild.
That's the power of consistency and commitment, kind of mixed in with reciprocation.
Gotcha.
We like to be seen as consistent.
Right.
So once we've made even a small concession, we're much more likely to go along with larger related requests later.
Okay, so we've got free samples, we've got rejection, then retreat, door in the face. Anything else we should be aware of?
The key here is awareness.
Okay.
Pay attention to those stomach signs. You know that feeling, like a sense of discomfort when a request just doesn't feel right?
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. Like a little alarm bell.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Don't ignore those feelings.
Okay.
They're often trying to tell you something important. And be extra cautious when you're dealing with people you like or feel connected to, because that's when reciprocation can be the strongest.
Wow, you're making me rethink all my relationships. So besides being aware of these stomach signs, is there anything else we can do to protect ourselves against these forces, these persuasive forces?
It's not just about defense. We can actually use these principles to do good as well. Think about the power of we. You know, that feeling of shared identity, belonging, it's incredibly powerful, and it can be used to create some really positive change.
We? Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this.
So there's this story, a concentration camp guard, hardened after years of just witnessing horrific things. He kept silent about his experiences for over 30 years, but then during a soccer match, he suddenly opened up, sharing his story with a complete stranger.
Oh, wow. That's heartbreaking, but also that's hopeful in a way.
It is.
What caused him to finally open up after all those years?
It was the soccer match. It triggered this powerful feeling of we-ness for him. The guard, he felt connected to his hometown team.
Right.
It was a reminder of this shared identity that sort of transcended all those horrors that he had experienced.
It's amazing that something as simple as a hometown could have that kind of impact.
It speaks to that deep need we all have for connection.
Yeah.
And it's not just about major life events or shared trauma. Researchers have found that even tiny things, like speaking in unison, wearing similar clothing, even just tapping our fingers to the same rhythm, can foster this feeling of we-ness.
It's like we're programmed to look for that common ground.
We are.
Those little cues that tell us we're part of the same tribe.
Exactly. And this sense of unity, it has a ripple effect.
Right.
It can make us favor members of our own group, more conform to group norms, even sacrifice for the well-being of the group.
It's like that saying, united we stand, divided we fall.
Exactly that. But this we-ness can also lead to problems, you know?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Like rivalries, right? Between sports teams, or even worse, conflicts based on nationality or ethnicity.
You're right. While unity can be a powerful force for good, it can also be exploited to create division and conflict.
Oh, for sure. It's a double-edged sword.
It is.
Okay, so how do we harness the positive power of we while also avoiding those negative consequences?
It all comes down to being aware of how this feeling of unity is being used and for what purpose. Are we being manipulated into this us versus them mentality? Or are we genuinely finding common ground based on things like shared values and goals?
But checking our motivations and being aware of who might be trying to influence us.
Exactly.
So how can we use this knowledge of we-ness to actually build stronger relationships? Stronger communities?
Well, Cialdini actually talks about this study where researchers created this intense rivalry between groups of boys at summer camp.
Oh, wow. So they deliberately set them against each other.
They did. But then they introduced challenges that required those groups to work together, and the animosity actually faded.
Really?
It did, and a new sense of we emerged.
So even something simple like working together to fix a broken water pipe
Exactly.
can help bridge those divides.
Exactly. It shifts our focus from competition to collaboration,
Right.
reminding us that we're all on the same team.
This is giving me a lot to think about. Understanding this idea of we seems so important for navigating just all these interactions we have.
It is.
On a personal level, societal level.
Absolutely. It's really a fundamental part of what makes us human, this desire to connect and belong. And the more we understand how this desire can be a source of both strength and vulnerability, the better choices we can make about how we interact with the world.
I love that. This has been so insightful. It's like I'm seeing the world with a whole new set of eyes, seeing all these hidden forces at work.
That's the first step.
Yeah.
Toward making more deliberate, empowered choices.
So we've seen how this principle of reciprocation, right? It pops up everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere.
From those free samples at the grocery store to those, like, kind of sneaky sales tactics.
Right, exactly.
Where you walk away thinking, how did I end up with this thing that I never wanted?
Happens to the best of us. It's this constant give and take.
Yeah.
Understanding the rules of the game, it's really important, you know?
It is. It's like you've got this secret decoder ring for the world of persuasion.
I love that analogy.
Okay, so for our listeners, what's the biggest takeaway here? How can they use this knowledge to navigate all of this?
I think the most important thing is just awareness. Recognize that this principle, it's happening in so many of our interactions, big and small. Pay attention to how it makes you feel. Remember those stomach signs?
Oh, yeah.
If something feels off, don't be afraid to question whether you're really making a free choice or being influenced by something you're not even aware of.
It's like we have to become, like, smarter about not just the things we're buying, but the interactions themselves.
That's a great way to put it.
To ask, am I saying yes because I really want to?
Yeah.
Or am I feeling pressured by this, like, obligation?
Exactly. And it's not about rejecting everything, every offer, every favor, but just being mindful of those underlying dynamics, making sure that your choices align with your values and your goals.
It's about taking control of the yes,
Yeah.
not letting it be an automatic thing.
Exactly. And once you start seeing the world through this lens,
Oh, yeah.
you'll be amazed how often it's happening.
It's kind of mind-blowing, right? Well, this has been such an eye-opening deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much about how persuasion works and how to deal with it better.
It's a journey.
Yeah.
Continuous learning.
Oh, for sure.
But hopefully, you know, knowing all this will help you not only make better choices for yourself, but also use this principle, like we talked about, to do good.
For good.
Build stronger relationships, create some positive change out there in the world.
I love that. All right, so as we wrap up this deep dive, one final thought for everyone listening out there. We've talked about how this principle can be used to influence our choices, good and bad. But what if we could flip it around? What if we could consciously use this principle to create more kindness?
Oh, yeah.
More generosity, more cooperation in our daily lives? Something to think about, and we'll see you on our next deep dive.